And this is the official first engagement of Rebecca, Montgomery County Delegation staffer with our committee. Last time she was a guest.
Yes.
She's officially taking over. Welcome.
Thank you. Okay, I think you should be good to go.
Great. Good morning, everyone. I am Delegate Lily Chi, and welcome to the Montgomery County House Delegation Economic Development Committee's second briefing. I want to welcome all of you who are watching, and thank you all for making the time to join us for this very exciting briefing today that we've been looking forward to. Today, we're going to focus on Montgomery County's innovation and tech-led economy, which really has been a great silver lining in spite of the pandemic-ravaged economy and all the challenges that we all face. Montgomery County has been uniquely situated with all the human capital and organizational infrastructure to capture this great opportunity and to contribute to the world in terms of advancement in public health, especially in R&D. So I'm very excited that we have a great, impressive panel to talk to us about the many developments. We have a cluster of companies that are rushing to find cures and treatments and tests. So I want to take a moment to thank all of you great panelists for joining us. But first, let me take a minute to introduce my colleagues on the Economic Development Committee. I want to start with my Vice Chair, Delegate Jared Solomon, and Delegate Ann Kaiser, who is Chair of Ways and Means, and Delegate Ariana Kelly, who is the former Chair of this committee, and Delegate Leslie Lopez that I see here. Oh, and also, of course, Delegate Kirill Resnick, who also joined us. Thank you all, committee members. And I also want to recognize my other colleagues, Majority Leader Eric Lutke, and also Senator Susan Lee for joining us. Now I am going to turn it over to Ben Wu, who in the spirit of great partnership has reached out again to the Chamber of Commerce and the Maryland Tech Council in assembling this great discussion today. But I first want to say I am so excited that after these news broke about the Pfizer vaccine, you could see, people just breathe a sigh of relief. At least the one vaccine has proven to work, and it's exceeding everyone's expectations. But I know there are many companies of all sizes, big and small, in Montgomery County that are doing similar things. And so today, I didn't, Len, Dr. Freeland from GSK, which is in my district, is going to give us a briefing. But I'm going to turn it over to Ben Wu, CEO of MCEDC, to introduce all the panelists.
Well, great. Good morning, Committee Chair Chi and the members of the Montgomery County General Assembly delegation. On behalf of the Chamber of Commerce, the Tech Council, the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to continue our dialogue on the important issues affecting Montgomery County's economic recovery. We heard last month from small businesses who pleaded with the delegation to be mindful of their precarious situation as they struggle to remain open against the headwinds of the pandemic and the resulting economic impact. And it'll be made even harder for them with the rollback of local business operations on the horizon. And it's clear that the public health crisis will require all of us to work together to provide an economic recovery that will get us to the other side of this emergency. And last month, we shared the data that showed significant economic disruptions and an uneven recovery for Montgomery County businesses. But one area that we're not just doing well locally, but also leading the country is in our innovation sectors, especially the life sciences. For the Montgomery County EDC, we continue to prioritize and nurture these innovation sectors in order to sustain our technology-led Montgomery County and Maryland economy. And since COVID-19 hit, over $3 billion of public, private, and foundational funding for coronavirus vaccine, research, and manufacturing has been invested in local Montgomery County life sciences companies. So I'd like to now turn over the presentation to Brad Stewart, the MCDC's Senior Vice President of Business Development, to discuss some of those investments and also some of the key attractions and expansions that we've recently had in Montgomery County.
Thanks very much, Ben. I appreciate it. Is it all right if I share slides here, or it'd be easier if I just talk? I wanted to give you a little bit of an idea about the work we've been putting in. And I appreciate being able to do this at a time when it's such a transformational time in our economy and in our lives. And so for us, we've been diligently working at transforming the way we look at business development and bringing businesses into Montgomery County this entire year. And we're making great progress on that before this pandemic hit. And so we've only accelerated our efforts and been able to do that even faster, while at the same time doing everything possible to help our businesses continue to succeed that are here and help them through this period of time. And we appreciate all the support and efforts the state of Maryland has put forth to help those businesses. So much appreciated. And again, thank you for allowing me to speak. So for us, we've tried to really focus our actions at where we have strengths. I think one of the things that I view as a great opportunity for us is to focus our teams and our efforts on where we have significant and valuable capabilities to people around the world, and then utilizing that to attract even more of those, to take strength from strength, and not dilute our efforts by focusing on things that are unlikely or a low likelihood for us to win or to be successful in. And we've had very positive progress and success as a result of doing that. We have a great team at Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation, and we have incredible partners around the state, and you'll hear from many of them during this discussion. So for us, we've really focused on beginning to create better placemaking for Montgomery County. And I'll talk a little bit about that. But as you see here, we really are starting to brand this as the immunology capital next to the nation's capital. And that fits in coherently with all of the other areas that we feel we have significant strengths where we can continue to grow and already are growing. So for us, it's always trying to help people. We are here in Montgomery County. We are here in Maryland, and we understand where we are. But we're looking at a much more global audience to attract people to. And we realize that they don't necessarily, when we're talking to someone in Asia or talking to someone in Europe, know where those are physically located with the United States. So we're starting to do a much more comprehensive job of placemaking and helping them understand where we fit into the nation's economy, both physically and economically. And then additionally, this is a slide that I'm proud of because I've been here almost 2.5 decades helping to try and grow the life sciences industry here in Montgomery County and in Maryland. And for me, one of the biggest challenges has been to how do we comprehensively let people understand what huge, irreplaceable and invaluable resources we have here in Maryland that make us unlike any other place on the face of the earth. So this is a slide, a graphic that we put together to illustrate that. And one of the things that really has struck me over the decades is the concentration of the healthcare and life sciences industry, which is focused right here. And so if you look at this map, which has Montgomery County, we have the 3 largest entities in the world responsible for healthcare payment. We have CMS that's right here outside of Baltimore that has over $1 trillion per year that they're responsible for in payment for healthcare. We have the largest researcher of healthcare in the world, NIH, with a budget of over $41 billion. And we have the largest regulator of healthcare in the world, FDA, over $5 billion a year budget there. And it's very powerful when people start to see this put graphically together for them, because they begin to get a context of where we are, what access we have to resources, and particularly when you look at the budgets and the size of these agencies that are here, almost all of them are larger than everyone else in the world combined. When you look at a budget just for CMS of $1 trillion a year in payment, which is a fraction of the U.S. healthcare system's budget, it's larger than almost every other country on the face of the earth. So it really begins to allow people to have context of where we are and what resources and advantages we can bring to them. So for us, like I said earlier, we really have tried to focus our efforts where we have strengths and can grow upon those strengths, and not divert or waste time on areas where we're unlikely to be able to provide value to people. The 3 areas where we're very focused are in cell and gene therapy, vaccines, and international expansion, or a place for international companies to have a U.S. headquarters. And we feel those really are the greatest opportunities for us to grow, and we are growing already in those areas as we speak. And I'll talk a little bit about that. In addition to that, Marty will probably talk about advanced biomanufacturing, which would also include biologic drugs, proteins, monoclonal antibodies, and those also fit into this, but are not quite a top priority. And you've seen a lot of this. Has been alluded to. There's been a tremendous amount of work among our companies here in Montgomery County regarding COVID. And we want to make sure that we not only publicize that, but make sure people understand what we're doing. You've seen a tremendous amount of investment, and I'll show you a slide in a second. It's just a press release about that. But on the vaccine front, companies like Emergent, Novavax, GSK, that are all involved in that fight, but even smaller companies that you might not know, Altimmune and Vigene, who are working together to develop vaccines. We have companies in the diagnostic space, and we've been working with all these companies to make sure that as they grow right here in Montgomery County. And you'll see that almost all of these companies we are working with currently, and many of them we've already announced their expansions and further growth here in Montgomery County. We'll continue to do that. As we do so, we also are continuing to attract new companies that are in the COVID space. In September, we announced 2 new companies, on-demand pharmaceuticals and autonomous pharmaceuticals, both working in the therapeutic space, one on advanced manufacturing of drugs, the other on novel antivirals used to treat respiratory viruses, including coronavirus, both of those locating to Rockville. And then we also are happy to announce that one of the companies that has been here for a couple of years now, Cartesian Therapeutics, has already started clinical trials for the first cell therapy to treat coronavirus. And so there's a tremendous progress going on here. In addition to that, you've seen in the last month, foreign companies who've established U.S. headquarters here, like Nobel Pharma, located down in Bethesda. And then we announced yesterday with a press release that Genetron, which is a Chinese company in the cancer diagnostic space, is moving their operations from North Carolina here to grow. So we're very, very appreciative of these companies. And that's a little bit of a sample of the efforts we're making and the sort of strides and tools that we're using to do that. So with that, I'll stop and turn it over to our next speaker.
Well, thank you, Brad. Our next speaker is with GSK. Delegate Chi mentioned that she is very proud to represent the U.S. vaccine headquarters for GlaxoSmithKline. And we have Dr. Leonard Freeland from GSK to talk a little bit about vaccine development and also vaccine development in Montgomery County. Dr. Freeland.
Hello, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen. Do you see that? Perfect. Okay. Well, I want to thank Delegate Chi for inviting me. I'm a pediatrician and a vaccine research scientist at GSK. I work in Philadelphia, and I spend quite a lot of time visiting with my R&D colleagues at our R&D site in Rockville, Maryland. So fantastic, and thank you for hosting us in your county. We're extremely pleased and honored to contribute to the economic development that's happening there. As mentioned, I'm a vaccine research scientist, and I'm here today to deliver a scientific presentation. This is for educational purposes only. If you have particular questions, of course, I'm available to address them, but I'm here today to help you have a better understanding of what's happening in the technology space as we're developing vaccines to create solutions to address the COVID-19 pandemic. And I want to thank Delegate Chi, Marty Rosendale, and Michelle for inviting me here today. So let's get started. There we go. So I just wanted to give you a general sense of what's been happening. So I hope people may recognize this particular painting. This was a painting depicting a particular event in May 1796, when Edward Jenner, a general practitioner in the United Kingdom, scratched into the skin of 8-year-old James Phipps the pus from a lesion from a milkmaid who developed a case of cowpox. And this was a seminal event because a few weeks later, James Phipps was challenged, was actually exposed to smallpox, and he was protected. And we tend to think of this as a seminal event, sort of the beginning of the field of vaccinology. The Latin word for cow is vacca, and that's where the word vaccinology comes from. But when Edward Jenner did this in 1796, he had absolutely no knowledge of microbes. He had no idea why this worked. It was an empirical observation. What we've had in the last 200 years is tremendous advances of innovations, continuous knowledge, improvements, some serendipity along the way, refinements, but this has always been driven by the desire to improve public health. And so if we fast forward 100 years to the end of the 1800s, the beginning of the 1900s, we start to move into the modern era of science and vaccinology. And this was a couple of major events happened. And I list 5 of them here on the slide. The first is the discovery that microorganisms were the causes of infectious diseases, the work from Koch and Pasteur. And then there was the discovery from Malenkov that there were certain cells that ingested bacteria and destroyed microbes. And these were called phagocytes. Those white blood cells were called phagocytes. And that was a very important discovery. The very first Nobel Prize in Medicine was awarded to von Behring for his work discovering anti-sera, that there was something that was in our bloodstream that protected us against disease. And this was using anti-sera for diphtheria and tetanus disease, where they would vaccinate horses, bleed the horses with the antibodies to tetanus and diphtheria. And this was the discovery of the immune system, the very first Nobel Prize in Medicine. The Nobel Prize in Medicine was also awarded in 1908 to von Ehrlich for his discovery of the antibody theory, that antigens were the target of the immune response. And all of these discoveries led to this concept of natural immunity to infection. And that's what really drove forward the discoveries in vaccinology. And so what I want to take you through in the next 5 or 10 minutes is to talk about what are the vaccine technologies that are being used, that have been used over the last century to develop vaccines, and to let you know that all of these technologies are being applied to develop vaccines to help protect against SARS-CoV-2, the agent that causes the disease we know as COVID-19. And these technologies include the whole virus vaccines, viral vector vaccines, nucleic acid vaccines, and the protein subunit vaccines. And I'm going to take you through all of these very quickly on sort of a whirlwind tour of vaccine technologies. I'll end with what we're doing at GSK, which technology we're using, and then address any questions that you may have. So the first technology I want to speak about are the whole virus vaccines. The technology here is that we take the pathogen, we grow it up in cell culture, and then we either weaken it, we attenuate it through cell passage, where we take the virus that was growing well in human cell culture and then start to pass it in other types of animal cell cultures where mutations will form. The virus becomes weakened, but is still immunogenic. And examples of weakened virus vaccines, live attenuated virus vaccines, we still use them today. And these are your measles, your mumps, your rubella, your chickenpox, and your rotavirus vaccines, among others. Another approach to whole virus vaccines is that we grow the virus in favorable conditions and then break it apart. We inactivate it with heat or with chemicals. And then the pathogen is still immunogenic, but can't cause disease because it's been inactivated. And examples there are your inactivated poliovirus vaccine, your hepatitis A vaccines, and your rabies vaccines. These weakened or inactivated virus vaccines are administered to a patient. They're taken up by our immune system, in particular white blood cells, that will then process pieces of the pathogen in what we refer to as the APCs, the antigen presenting cells. These cells essentially then present peptides, little protein sequences that represent the pathogen, and then they get delivered to the adaptive arm of our immune system in the thymus. And then this drives a long-term memory with B cells and T cells, so that when we're exposed to the pathogen in the future, we have an army ready to protect us against this disease. And there are many teams that are using weakened and inactivated whole viruses to help develop vaccines for SARS-CoV-2. None of these particular vaccines are under discovery right now in the United States. These are vaccine technologies that are being utilized predominantly in Asia, in China, and in other parts of the world. But these vaccines are being developed, whole virus vaccines. They take some time to develop because you have to grow the pathogen, and that's why they're not leading the charge, because we have to grow the pathogens, and that takes time to make that vaccine preparation. The next technology I want to speak about are the protein-based vaccines, where we take the pathogen and we extract a particular protein, a particular antigen, a molecular signature from that pathogen. And we can do this in many different ways. And the most common way is to take that antigen and essentially produce it with recombinant DNA technology, where we put the antigenic sequence of the protein in yeast or a baculovirus cell system. That becomes the factory that makes the antigen, and that becomes the vaccine that's often formulated with an adjuvant. And you know these protein subunit vaccines, these recombinant protein subunit vaccines, these are your vaccines for hepatitis B, for human papillomavirus, for meningococcal serogroup B, and the recombinant vaccine for shingles. These are all recombinant protein subunit vaccines or virus-like particles, VLP vaccines. And then these protein subunits are administered to the patient. They're taken up by the antigen presenting cell. They process and present the coronavirus peptide to drive that adaptive immune response with long-term memory. The next and by the way, this technology is being utilized for coronavirus vaccines right in your neighborhood in Montgomery County. This is the technology that Novavax is using and that GSK is using. The next technology are the viral vector vaccines, and this is a relatively newer technology. There's only one viral vector vaccine that's licensed for use in the United States, and that's a vaccine to help protect against Ebola. So it's not routinely used. It's in essentially the stockpile for the US government. And the approach here is that we take a weakened non-pathogenic virus and we use that as a delivery vehicle. We insert into the virus a protein that makes an antigen. In the case of SARS-CoV-2, it would be the coronavirus spike protein. And then we can do this either with replicating viral vectors or with non-replicating viral vectors. And this could be, for example, a measles vector or an adenovirus vector. And then the vector is administered to the patient. The vector is taken up by the cells, and then the human body essentially becomes the factory that makes the antigen. The virus then replicates and presents the antigen to the antigen presenting cells. The coronavirus peptides are expressed and drive an adaptive immune system. And this is the approach that's being taken with the vaccines that you've heard about from J&J and from AstraZeneca. These are viral vector vaccines for SARS-CoV-2. Very potentially promising technology. And the last technology, which is the technology that we all heard about yesterday with the outstanding, extremely promising results from Pfizer, is utilizing nucleic acid, either RNA or DNA. And here what we do is we take the sequence of a particular antigen. In the case of SARS-CoV-2, the sequence that we're looking at is the coronavirus spike protein, the so-called S protein. We have the DNA sequence for that protein or the RNA sequence, and we deliver that to the patient. And then the patient becomes the factory that takes that sequence and then begins to make that viral protein for the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein. It's taken up by the antigen presenting cell. Those peptides are expressed and then drive the adaptive immune response. And many teams are developing RNA vaccines. The two leaders are Pfizer and Moderna. There are other companies as well. And there are also groups utilizing DNA technology, one particular group right here in Philadelphia called Inovio. And so what is the approach that GSK is taking? Just very, very quickly. GSK is a leader in the field of adjuvants. These are chemical substances, often coming from natural derivatives, that are formulated with vaccines that can help drive and enhance and modulate the immune response to the antigen. The adjuvant systems that you're familiar with are in our vaccines for human papillomavirus, for shingles, and for hepatitis B. The particular adjuvant system that we're utilizing for our coronavirus vaccines is called AS03. It's what we refer to as an oil in water emulsion, and this adjuvant system is already in the US stockpile for pandemic potential H5N1 vaccine. And this adjuvant system was utilized outside of the United States in 2009 during the H1N1 pandemic. AS03 adjuvant is being formulated with the SARS-CoV-2 protein from our collaborators, from Sanofi Pasteur, from a company called Clover, and a company called Medicago, where they're making recombinant spike proteins, and they're formulating their vaccines with the AS03 adjuvant. And one of the things that the adjuvant systems can do is that they can make a vaccine be potent with less antigen per dose. And that's very important because there are 7 billion people who live on the planet, and we're going to need many licensed vaccines and many, many doses of vaccines to vaccinate our planet. And if we can get more doses of vaccine out of our production process with antigen sparing, we'll have more vaccine available to more people sooner. Right now, we are in phase 1 work with all 3 of those collaborators, and we expect to start phase 3 programs for all of those collaborators before the end of the year. And we have committed to make up to 1 billion doses of the AS03 adjuvant to be utilized with these collaborations. And we hope that GSK is going to play a role with multiple vaccines that will be available to help protect against SARS-CoV-2. And very briefly, so what's happening with the GSK collaborations? As I mentioned, the collaborations with Clover, Medicago, and Sanofi Pasteur. These are all of our most advanced collaborations. They're all finishing phase 1 work and heading into phase 2, phase 3 by the end of the year. As far as the collaboration with Sanofi Pasteur, we have a number of agreements now underway with Operation Warp Speed here in the United States and with governments in the European Union, Canada, the UK, and a global collaboration called COVAX as well, to have these vaccines available for people all around the world so everybody can potentially benefit and we can get this pandemic under control. And as we finish up, I also want to talk about other technologies, and that is in the field of therapeutics. We're also going to need to have therapeutics to help people who do get sick. Not everybody will get vaccinated. Not everybody will complete their full vaccination course. Not everybody will be able to get vaccine right away. And also, no vaccine is 100% effective. And so we're going to need to have therapeutics. And the therapeutics that we're looking at fall into 2 categories. We're looking at therapeutics that can dampen down parts of the immune system that's in hyperdrive, to dampen down that post-inflammatory cytokine storm. And we're also looking at monoclonal antibodies to help protect against COVID-19 disease. Yesterday, very exciting, there was an emergency use authorization by the FDA for a monoclonal antibody made by the company Lilly. And we have a very similar approach with a group that we're working with called Vir Biotechnology, where we're looking at therapeutics in addition to traditional vaccines. So both treatments and preventions. And I also want to just highlight one thing, that one of the things that we're seeing, and is very important when you look at what's happening in Montgomery County, is the importance of collaboration. The pandemic has really highlighted that everybody needs to collaborate. Groups that are traditionally like GSK and Sanofi Pasteur, groups that are competitors, we're now partners because we're all looking to take our knowledge, our skills and expertise and solve a very, very important public health crisis. And so collaboration is critical. It's also important to mention, and you have, of course, the FDA in your neighborhood. The work that the FDA and other branches of Health and Human Services have in place to monitor vaccine safety in the United States is outstanding. We have the most robust safety monitoring programs anywhere in the world. And a lot of that is driven by the work coming out of the FDA in collaboration with the entire vaccine enterprise. So very, very quickly. And lastly, I want to mention the importance of vaccines across the lifespan. The pandemic has had tremendous impacts, both economically, as you've mentioned, but also on public health. As people were not going to the doctor's office, were not going to the pharmacies, were not getting routine medical visits. They also were missing routine vaccinations. We had tremendous, dramatic declines in pediatric immunization and in adult immunization. We've started to see a recovery where children are catching up to the vaccines that they've missed. but we still have lags in adult vaccination. And it's very important that adults be vaccinated this year against influenza, against streptococcus pneumonia, pertussis, and shingles, because we don't want to have secondary outbreaks of disease on top of what's already happening with the COVID-19 pandemic. So very, very important. And also, and this is going to also be driven by Health and Human Services, the critical importance of vaccine implementation. It's incredibly exciting, the news yesterday coming from Pfizer, that vaccine technology has really helped to address a critical need. The spike protein appears to be the right antigen. I would expect that all the vaccines that are using the spike protein will be highly effective, and also we'll learn about their safety and durability. But what's going to be critically important then is going to be implementation. A vaccine that sits on the shelf does nothing. Vaccines have to be administered to people, and people have to have confidence in vaccination. And so this mass distribution, storage, and handling, and raising vaccine confidence is going to be absolutely critical. And the whole biotech community in Maryland is absolutely critically focused on this, because the technologies are wonderful, but if they don't result in vaccination, they're not going to be helpful at all. And then also, and I know that Delegate Chi has expressed interest in issues around school flu requirements and opening back up of schools and making sure that everybody is vaccinated. And I think that's critically important, that we utilize every opportunity to access patients in schools, at workplaces, mass vaccination clinics, so that everybody can benefit from the SARS-CoV-2 vaccines that are going to be authorized and coming, and all the other vaccines that are recommended. So at this point, I'm going to stop, and I'll take any questions. And again, thank you for the opportunity to present this information for you. I hope that it provided a sort of a vocabulary about what these technologies are.
Thank you, Dr. Freeland. That was very educational. Dr. Freeland, GSK is a global powerhouse, and some of the other companies that you mentioned in Montgomery County, AstraZeneca, Emergent, Novavax, they all have significant national and international presence. But a number of the companies that Brad had mentioned that are already engaged in the coronavirus space and seeking to assist in research and development are smaller companies and startups and entrepreneurs. And so we want to turn over to Gg Godwin, the president and CEO of the Montgomery County Chamber, to talk about some of the impacts of technology and innovation on small businesses.
And thank you. And as you do that, I wanted to mention, I do apologize, I mentioned to Delegate Chi and Marty that I need to leave at 12 o'clock sharp to actually get on a call with the US Congress. One of the committees is asking for a briefing. So I'll hang on till 12, but I apologize, I won't be here from the very end of your meeting.
Why don't we do that? Gigi also needs to leave early, so after Gigi speaks, I will ask Delegate Kaiser to ask her question of Dr. Freeland, who also needs to leave a little early, and then we'll move on with the rest of the Q&A. Okay, thanks.
Well, again, I want to say thank you for the opportunity. I thought our discussion last week was truly a huge step forward in connecting all of us and opening up a dialogue about what our businesses need. I appreciate the focus today very much, and especially Brad's presentation was very helpful. And our chamber, strongly believes that we should be focusing on all things federal in this county, because HHS is our county's Pentagon, essentially. And just so you know, since we're focused on federal contracting, and some of you have heard this and know it, but we are not only, focused on, we're not only number 2 in all small businesses that do federal contracting, we're also number 1 specifically in health IT. So in addition to the amazing work that was described in the biospace, a huge part of that support by companies, small businesses like David Wen, our chamber board members on this call, and he's speaking next. Our small businesses are doing big things in designing health IT for the federal government, and they're in the commercial space as well, and they're changing the world. And I want to point out that they have the same challenges that many of our companies have. So if you appreciate that federal contracting for small businesses in Montgomery County is a $10 billion a year investment that the federal government makes that flows through our companies. It's essential, it's an economic imperative that those companies are successful. For them to be successful in health IT and in bio, they have got to be competitive in their ability to attract and retain talent. And I'm jumping right into this issue because that goes to the kind of policies that our legislators make to make it possible for the talent that all of our companies are trying to attract and retain are willing and able to stay here, get them here, keep them here, grow them here, all of those things. So, you have to have the best talent because they're competing not only regionally, but nationally and internationally for the best minds to come up with the solutions for all of these challenges. So it's exciting, but it's also a challenge. So just to say once again that we have to remember, as we talked about last week, all of our small businesses that are in this particular space have many of the other same issues. They're concerned about employment liability, all of those topics we discussed, access to childcare, access to broadband that their employees need. All of those things are issues that I'm hoping that you will carry forward and address as you go into the legislative session, because we need solutions to access issues for employees. So whether you're building blockchain technology for HHS or you're doing the gene therapy work, in every case, you've got employees who need access to childcare, the employers are concerned about the liability issues that came about with all the disruption in employment. We have all of that. I spoke before we started. I also raised a concern about, I think we need to be looking carefully what's going to happen nationally and with the federal government. We're hoping that they approve a budget in December, but as all of us can remember, and we don't think there's an appetite for shutting down the government, but we're in an unusual time. And I'm just going to say we're already paying attention to how things line up there, because the last thing we need, and the last thing any of us need, is to have to clean up the problems associated with that on top of everything else. So I'm just I cringed when we were briefed on that yesterday, but I'm mentioning it to you so that you can also cringe along with me. Misery loves company. But I just wanted to say thank you, and I do apologize for having to step off, but I'm grateful to you, Delegate Chi, and I'm very much appreciative of our great partnership with MCEDC on this. Again, businesses are businesses, small businesses, and whether they are finding a solution to this vaccine, the need for a vaccine, or designing the healthcare that supports it, I just would encourage you to remember that they've got to be able to attract and retain talent, and cost of living, quality of life, access to opportunity, all of those things are necessary, to have the right people on everybody's team. Thank you.
Thank you, Gigi.
Oh, I wanted to say one other thing. I have to leave, but Tricia Swanson, our Vice President of Government Relations, is on the call, and I know she's going to be here to participate through and be able to answer any other questions.
All right. Now, I know Dr. Freeland needs to leave. I know next is supposed to be David Yuan, but since Delegate Kaiser has a question, if it's a quick one, we can maybe have that question answered before David speaks.
Thank you, Chair Chi. Dr. Freeland, thank you. Maybe as like many people, I watched 60 Minutes this past Sunday night.
Mm-hmm.
Her story was about vaccines, and it was very positive. But what was very confusing to me that they never seemingly answered was, if it's untested and it hasn't gone to the FDA yet, why had they made so many? So that's not you, but I thought maybe you had some insight to be able to clarify that for me and anyone else who may have seen that story the other night.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. It's a really interesting question. I also did have the opportunity to listen to that 60 Minutes piece, which was really, really fascinating. So when vaccines are developed, we hear all the time it takes 5 to 10 years. And why does it take so long? It has to do with calculated risk along the way and investments. The capital investment to manufacture a vaccine is extraordinary. Building a factory, often a separate factory for each vaccine, the regulatory requirements to meet not only the FDA's regulations, but the regulations in the European Union, in Japan, et cetera. So many different countries' regulations, and it takes quite a while. And companies are loath to commit the hundreds of millions of dollars and the time for their staff to build a factory and to get it all ready until they're pretty sure that they have a successful product. And that comes when you get the results from phase 3. So in a typical world, the decision to build the factory to make the Pfizer vaccine would have started yesterday when they had the results that the vaccine was effective. And now they'd be starting to build that factory. And so what Moncef Slaoui and Operation Warp Speed did here was something truly remarkable. They took a risk and they said, we're going to devote capital investments to ask you to start making your vaccines. And it wasn't just Pfizer and GSK. It was Emergent and Catalent and all the other groups that are involved, the people who make the syringes and the vials, everybody. And we're going to say, start making it. We don't know if it's going to work. We're going to invest in, I think they have 6 investments right now, and apparently there's a 7th coming. And they're saying, if 1 or 2 or 3 fail, that's just part of doing business here because the public health crisis is so grave. And so they've made an investment essentially at risk. It wasn't about risk of safety. It was about risk of something not working, and they'd be essentially throwing away their money. And given the trillion-plus impact of COVID-19, a few billion-dollar investment is well worth it. And that was the calculation that was made. And so that's essentially why they're making vaccine that they may not use. I think, though, based on yesterday's results, we now know that the spike protein is the right antigen. That's the target that results in protection if we can mount an immune response. All of the preclinical and phase 1 data that's been shown for all of those technologies that I've mentioned, protein subunits, viral vectors, nucleic acid, and even the inactivated vaccine, all of the data shows that neutralizing antibodies are being made. They exceed the antibodies that we see in people who've recovered from disease, and it's all targeted against that spike protein. So my assessment, and it's just me saying this, is I think all of the technologies are going to work, and they were going to work very well. The question is, how long do they last? How well do they work in certain subpopulations like people over age 75, people with underlying medical conditions, underrepresented minority populations? That'll all get teased out over time. But so I think that their investment in Operation Warp Speed is going to pay off because they need to have, there's 330 million people who live in the United States. If we need a 2-dose vaccine, that's over 600 million doses of vaccine that's needed just for the US. No one company can meet that demand. We need multiple winners here. And that's really the investment that's being made. And just to put things in perspective, since you mentioned GSK, it depends how you look at it, but from a sales perspective, I'm told that we're the largest vaccine manufacturer globally as far as sales are concerned. Last year, our total volume of vaccines for people around the world was something on the order of 800 million doses. And that's across 30 vaccines that are licensed around the world by GSK. We're looking at orders of magnitude that are 3-4 times higher than what the largest vaccine manufacturer makes for vaccines in a given year. This is an incredible, unheard of response. But the beauty is that it's science and technology that's delivering here. But now we need to pull it through. And we need to raise that confidence so that we can explain to the public that these vaccines are safe and effective. And by the way, in addition to vaccines, we still have to wear masks, social distance, avoid large crowds, and wash our hands, because the vaccine is not the answer. It is part of the solution, and a very good part of the solution.
Thank you very much, Dr. Freeland.
Thank you.
It's a great question, and I learned so much just by listening to you. Ben, maybe we could turn to Dr. Martin Rosendale and for the panel to kick off.
So, Dr. Freeland talked about the great work that GSK is doing in the research and development space, but innovation isn't just in the lab. It also requires growth through a number of other components, and it impacts workforce development, 5G deployment, permitting and regulation for rapid growth. And so we have a panel, a tripartite panel led by Marty Rosendale, the CEO of the Tech Council, who's joined by Angela Graham, President and CEO of Quality Biologics, which is also driving growth through the life sciences. And more importantly, she is a MCDC board member. So we're very proud to have Angela as part of our team. And then also David Nguyen, founder and CEO of United Solutions, to talk about driving growth through technology.
Great, Ben, thank you. And thank you all for the opportunity again today. I appreciate it. So you've heard a lot about the amazing things that are happening in Montgomery County, and truly the world is depending on what's happening in Montgomery County today. Excuse me. So when the pandemic hit, as you've heard, our technology companies, our life science companies weren't hit as hard as other industries, the hospitality industry, the restaurant industry, and many of them have excelled. The collaboration and cooperation has been amazing. The things that are happening here with respect to vaccine development, therapeutic development are phenomenal. Our tech companies stepped up and collaborated to help make personal protective equipment and to provide support for the stimulus packages. So that collaboration has been phenomenal. There's still about 20% of our technology and life science companies that are struggling because of the pandemic. Either their business-to-business sales forces can't make sales calls, their supply chain may have challenges because of COVID issues. There's still about 20% that are having challenges, and we're helping them. We have formed a business continuity task force and put other resources in place, but I don't want you to lose sight of that 20%. On the tech side, since we're talking about growth and where do we go from here and where can we take this, we've heard a lot about workforce today. So workforce was an issue going into the pandemic. Workforce and talent remains an issue today. I know there's been things done with respect to apprenticeship programs, with respect to internship programs and tax credits related to those. But in general, I can tell you that the industry is feeling like there's been a whole lot of motion and not a lot of movement, because workforce and talent remains an issue for these companies going forward. And on the tech side, again, as you've heard, we've got great companies in digital transformation that are facilitating the transition from in-person business to virtual business. Cybersecurity is huge in Maryland and in Montgomery County. And we have a tremendous industry that's building up in quantum computing. Now, quantum computing is not my field. I'm not a subject matter expert in that space. I'm a biologist. But from what I can tell, from what I can see, it looks like the largest quantum computing cluster is building up right here in Maryland, which again presents a tremendous opportunity for us, as long as we focus on issues like workforce development, because that's going to present a whole new set of workforce issues for us to deal with. As long as we focus on infrastructure, 5G deployment, access to broadband, all of those issues that you're aware of, that we've heard about this morning. We're going to need to continue to focus on those areas to make the quantum computing cluster grow and expand, to expand all of the technology businesses that we have been developing here. And on the life sciences side, again, you saw Brad's first slide referred to the immunology capital. Well, you know, when you look at what's happened with the COVID-19 vaccine development, it's proven that right here in Maryland, in Montgomery County, we have the #1 cluster for vaccine development, probably in the world, certainly in the United States. The amount of Operation Warp Speed funding that's come to those companies, the venture capital that's come as a result, the CP also invested $400 million in Novavax. So the investment coming into this community and what we're seeing clearly demonstrates the vaccine cluster that's been developed here, but also the cell and gene cluster that's developed here as a result of you go all the way back to sequencing the human genome that happened here, and the fact that now that expertise has developed and continued to grow. And as those businesses are becoming commercial, as Brad mentioned, the biomanufacturing industry is expanding and growing rapidly. And that creates another workforce issue on top of the technology workforce issue. How do we bring in the talent? How do we grow the talent here? And I can tell you, as we're talking with the coalitions and the groups that we're bringing together to address these workforce issues, what we're seeing very early is that this is also a tremendous opportunity to improve the diversity and inclusivity of our workforce, because we can reach down to the high school level, to the early college level, and start helping people understand, young people understand, that these are exciting jobs, exciting high-paying jobs, and draw more people into the workforce and into those talent pools. So it creates tremendous opportunity for us. But on the life sciences front, in order to grow these industries, there's a number of things that I believe that we need to do. First, again, we need to stay focused on infrastructure, as I've said, and workforce is clearly an issue. But if you compare Montgomery County and the biocapital to some of the other clusters around the country, if you look, depending on who you talk to, we're ranked either number 4 or number 6. We're somewhere in that range. And if you break that down a little bit further, I personally believe in vaccine development, immunotherapy, cell and gene therapy. We're probably in the number 1 position. And that's based on capital investment, that's based on research and development. But in order to maintain that, and we've fallen behind, I believe, in the last few years, there's a few things that we need to focus on. I'll give you an example. You may have seen the news about Thrive, which is a cancer diagnostics company that spun out of Johns Hopkins. So Thrive Early Detection was formed here in Maryland. They got their initial investment, and the majority of the company got pulled to Boston. And then 18 months after they formed, they're a unicorn, and they get a $1.5 billion buyout opportunity from Exact Sciences. Well, why did they get pulled out? Well, if you look at Boston, Boston has over 30 life science incubators in that area. 30 life science incubators just in Boston. It's also very much an urban, tightly clustered development environment. So people can collide with one another. People can see one another. So that opportunity for collision and meeting up is also a tremendous benefit. But companies get pulled there because investors know that they're going to get the support that they need to continue to grow. These are things that we need to develop here. We'll have to work harder at those collision opportunities because we don't have that tight urban environment here. We have a suburban environment here. And so we'll have to work harder at those collision opportunities and helping people meet one another. But we can do that. The incubators, we need to focus on real incubators that help companies develop and grow and then graduate them onto a soft landing that supports them further beyond that. So there's tremendous opportunity. And I'm going to leave you with one last example. Some of you may know I'm from California, so Southern California I know pretty well. San Diego is another cluster that we compete with for that number 1 slot. Well, San Diego wasn't always a top bioscience cluster. And the biggest thing that they needed was access to capital. So where did they go? They helped their businesses learn how to navigate the capital markets, and they took them to San Francisco, which is where the closest source of venture capital was, and brought that capital into San Diego. Well, if you look here, San Francisco was further from San Diego than Boston is from Baltimore. And between Boston and Baltimore, you've also got the capital markets in New York. We have an opportunity to focus on that, focus on the capital markets and help our companies access that capital. And we need to do so. I know we're behind schedule, so I'm going to stop there. And Angela, I think you're next on the schedule, so I'm going to let Angela take it from here.
Oh, thank you, Marty. Hello, everyone. Thank you for giving me a few minutes to just share some of my thoughts on how we can grow the life sciences community. Again, my name is Angela Graham. I own Quality Biological. We are one of the biomanufacturers that supports the supply chain. So we make a lot of the components that many of the companies here are using in their development of their vaccines and additional research. So I guess one of the things that I know that probably has been talked about on multiple calls, regardless of what industry was looked at, is definitely this need for and looking at talent development. And specifically within life sciences, I do believe that there's a lot of programs that have been put together, and we can continue to do that regarding workforce development, because it's definitely an issue. One of the things that I don't hear a lot about, though, that I think that I would hope the delegation would think about is how do we attract more people? Like there is just still this void of, so it's not just developing people and helping them grow within the companies, but how do we get more people to want to live here in Maryland, in Montgomery County? And then something that I'm not aware of, and excuse me if this is something that you're already working on because I'm not as familiar with it, but I do think there is a need to look at how do we attract those early kind of career individuals coming out of college. There's always, there's a lot of higher education debt. Is there some sort of way that we can do some sort of, or explore like an individual tax credit that would offset higher education debt for STEM careers or something like that? Because we need more talent coming into this area, people who want to, or are incentivized basically to live here, as well as people who are graduating from here locally not to leave. We need to retain those individuals. And it might be another way that helps offset our cost of living. So it's something that I would ask that you consider and think about what can, as a way to attract more talent here. Once we get people here and keep them here, we can continue to look at these workforce development opportunities as we're continuing to work on partnerships between industry and the community colleges and institutions. I think we're putting a lot of those together, and we need to continue to fund those initiatives. But I really do think we really need to think about how do we just attract more people to live here. It's interesting, we have, we always talk about the number of PhDs here and people coming out of NIH, but how do we ensure that they don't leave? Because one of my concerns, I will tell you, with what we're seeing through this, the COVID era, people are now understanding that, I can live somewhere else and do my job, right? So particularly in like some of the tech fields, how do we keep people from leaving here? So I do think we really need to look at that, because we are not necessarily an area that attracts that 20 to 40 cluster. And those are the people we need to bring here to that we continue to have the talent for our tech jobs, as well as, I agree with Marty, we need more incubators, we need more accelerators, but then we're going to need the people that are going to want to be here to fill those incubators and the accelerators. So I know we're running behind, so I don't want to take up more time, but those were a couple of things that I hadn't heard that I wanted to share that I think really would help support the life science industry. And specifically one other thing I wanted to talk about. When we talk about biomanufacturing, it is absolutely a cluster to continue to figure out how we can support, because as a manufacturer, I can tell you it's capital intensive. It's very difficult I'm not going to say difficult, let's put it this way. I'm less inclined to move than maybe another company who can easily just, pick up their computers and go to another area. So I do think we need to think about how do we support companies that already exist, in particular in the biomanufacturing space. How do we develop programs to incentivize and help us to expand? Thank you.
David, and then after David, Lily, I assume we can ask questions at that point.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So thank you for the opportunity to speak about growth strategies for tech companies. Today I want to talk to you about how the future is actually arriving very early. And we're in a unique point in time that I thought that I would never see since the dot-com days during the 1999-2000 timeframe. So the fourth industrial revolution, as many of you have heard, which is characterized by the intelligent automation, is actually here. Surprisingly, the COVID pandemic has accelerated the impact and the transformation required by the fourth industrial revolution. So when the government and businesses face the challenge of moving remotely, they also are reconsidering their business models. It's very unusual. Yesterday, I was just at HHS. I walked through the halls. There's not a single person there except most of the senior executives at HHS. And so the federal government now and businesses are rethinking how they do business. And they are heavily investing in emerging technologies I've never seen before. Emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, quantum computing, 5G, blockchain, edge computing, just anything you can think of, they're investing. And so here's the evidence of what's happening. GSA has released a contract vehicle called STARS 3 8A. And STARS 2 was a contract vehicle dedicated to small business, which really didn't have any innovation component to it. The STARS 3 contract vehicle is entirely dedicated to emerging tech. This is a multi-billion-dollar contract vehicle entirely dedicated to emerging tech. In the last 2 or 3 years, the United States Air Force introduced a program called AFWEX, and it's all, again, $100 billions dedicated to innovations that help the Air Force. The Department of Defense did exactly the same thing. They introduced the JAIC, which is the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center, to drive innovations into the DoD. So because of this market shift and because of the way the government is restructuring the way they operate, they are investing in building new infrastructure that allows for remote work. There are many agencies that were struggling with how to do remote work because they required people to be, even HHS, they required people to be there. Now they're struggling with how to move people remotely. The emergence of the rapid adoption of emerging technologies have forced the government, particularly federal government, to restructure contracts so that they can move investments into steady state, the O&M type contracts, which many of our local small businesses are used to, and they're moving that into emerging technologies. And the transition to emerging technologies have made many companies like mine very successful. But I would say the majority of small businesses are not ready for that. The large businesses are very ready and equipped for that. And so we have a unique opportunity here to do something about, to make investments in the local economy to stimulate more of this investment. You've heard everybody talk about the talent pipeline being an issue. I can assure you, we have an open hiring policy. We cannot hire enough. We're looking desperately for cybersecurity talent, data scientists, blockchain developers, and just even developers in general. We have an open policy. Anybody that we have Monday and Tuesday dedicated to hiring, and anybody can just come in. We just hired 5 people just this week alone to work on AI and data science. We cannot compete without talent. And we've had, as a small business, we've had the DoD approach us and to help them build out their AI infrastructure because we built one of the first AI infrastructure. But they came to us and they said, look, you guys don't have enough people to support our needs. We have to bring in other, large business partners to help us. So the challenge is very real. One thing I do want to mention is that Angela was absolutely right. We have issues now where the star players in our company are looking to relocate somewhere else with a lower cost of living. And that is now creating tension within the company because in order for us to continue to drive innovation, we need that interaction that Marty was talking about, that chance encounter with people. And we're struggling with that now. On the other hand, with the pandemic, we're able to recruit from all around the world. So now we have people, we're hiring a lot of people in Texas, a lot of people, strangely, in New York, Boston, a ton of people now. Our workforce is very distributed, not like the way it used to be because that's the only way we can compete. But some ideas to help, to help the local economy. Please continue to invest in the research and development tax credit. In order for us to address the emerging, fourth industrial revolution, we have to build products that propel forward the AI and security and anything that impacts. We invest at least $2.5 million every year in research and development, and the tax credits help us a ton here. We would love to see ways to accelerate the acquisition of innovation in the county, and that could be through attracting venture capital. That could be transforming procurement, not just state and local, not just federal procurement, but state and local procurement to make them a little bit faster to reduce the business development costs for many of the small businesses. Certainly build a stronger talent pipeline, but I think the talent pipeline, when we talk about it, we have to look at what type of talent as well. I think it's important to provide jobs for those who are here who don't have jobs, but I think it's also important to build for the jobs of the future. And the talent pipeline should address the emerging needs, like in cybersecurity and artificial intelligence, because that's what the graduates want. The recent graduates from Maryland, Georgetown, that's what they want, emerging tech jobs. in AI, data science, blockchain. Also reconsider tax policies so that they are not increasing the cost of living. We face a lot of challenges bringing people here because one of the things that they're concerned with is, I can't afford a house. Those who are just graduating cannot afford a place to live here. And so they now relocating, around outside of the county and still working here because of the cost of living is just too high. Visa is another issue. Under the Trump administration, he made it very difficult for H1 or people, from the foreign workforce to come in and work with the local technology companies. So visa, H1 visas, OPTs, it was a huge issue. And we needed that as a source of supply because we can't find talent. We needed to rely on the H1 candidates and OPTs. And then lastly, maybe look at an innovation fund. The GSA is doing that, United States Air Force is doing that, and the Department of Defense is doing that. These are gigantic innovation funds. I don't expect us to be able to compete on the multi-$100 billion innovation fund, but we should commit to some sort of innovation fund to get the companies here to convert their competitive advantage in the relationships with the federal agencies they have to a new source of competitive advantage with emerging tech. And so lastly, I just want to conclude by saying the failure to invest in innovation at this time in the middle of a market shift and a pandemic, I think will cause our companies to be less competitive and they won't be able to reap the opportunities that are emerging right in front of them. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
Okay, Marty, unless you have other comments, I'm going to open up the floor for our members to ask questions. Is that okay with you?
Yes, please do.
Great, thank you. I want to take a moment to thank Angela for her service, for not only doing great business in Montgomery County, but also for her contribution on the board of MCEDC. I've enjoyed working with her. And thank you, my friend David Yuan, whose company has been very impressive. For my colleagues who did not know, David's company, United Solutions, actually was behind the technology of the Maryland Department of Motor Vehicles, the kiosks that you see, the public interface. They had to design that technology, if I'm right? They have done a lot of cool things. We're very proud that they are still in Montgomery County and growing and hiring a lot of great people. So thank you for all of your insights and contributions to our innovation economy. I'm going to start with my colleague, Delegate Resnick, who has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you all hear me? I think I just turned on. There we go. So I wanted to ask a question because not only was Ms. Graham's comments poignant in my concern, as well as the last speaker, Gigi as well alluded to this. And so you all raised something that I think is very important, but a point of frustration for me. And so I want to hear sort of your perspective on how we get past this. On the one hand, I'm hearing that people want to move here because of the standard of living, and you need us to help train the next workforce. That means education. You need us to provide the infrastructure that is necessary for your employees to get to work and then get to go home and have a reasonable amount of time with their families. You need us to provide tax credits for, or not tax credits, but tuition reimbursement to be able to attract talent. All of these things cost money, and we are limited in our ability to do that. At the same time, we're also being told that the standard of living here is too high, that the tax structures are difficult to live with in comparison to places like Texas and others that were mentioned. There is a tension here that we are never able to get past, and I want to see if we are able to get past it. Because on the one hand, you are asking us to spend large numbers of taxpayer dollars to help your industries. And at the same time, we're being told that the ability of your industry to contribute to that tax base, we make that difficult. So can somebody please relieve this tension in my mind about how we get to making sure that your industries, as well as all the other industries in our county that are so successful, thrive, but maintain the tax base that we need to make sure that we provide not just the things that you and your employees need, but the things that some of our poorest residents in our county who can't afford to buy a house here either, or who can't afford to Uber everywhere, or to maintain a car, or even to get groceries at times. So how do we do both of these things?
Okay, I'll jump in. I think it's clear. That's a tough question. I don't have an answer for that. I do think it's all about how do you balance. I don't know if we're ever going to not have tension, right? I don't think, but I do think we have to look at what is the return on investment for which areas that we do invest in. And I don't know the answer to your question, but I can tell you that if we don't support companies to grow, how are we going to have the tax base to take care of and support a lot of the needs that we have in the community for those who aren't able or aren't as successful? So I think that's the tough part. That's the job that I think is very tough, and why some of us don't choose to go into that area of work. But it is, I understand the frustration, because I think that many of us do what we can to support the community. But I just think that we have to always balance, I guess, trying to walk that tightrope, because at the end of the day, where is the money going to come from to support and to fund all the things that we need to get done in the community?
And I'll just add to that. So what Angela says, I believe, is right on target. It's always going to be a balance. There's always going to be a conflict, and it's just, we're going to have to balance the trade-offs between the two. I think if you look at different areas of the country, so I've been the CEO of biotech companies on both coasts, and I've seen the differences, and there are clearly differences. So the cost of living in San Diego and Boston is higher than the cost of living in Maryland, yet they attract talent, and they grow businesses there. But they also invest in those businesses. The California life sciences investments, I don't remember the numbers exactly, but it's something in excess of $100 million. The Massachusetts life sciences, since 2006, I think they've had about $1.5 billion. Now, we're never going to get to those numbers. I see that. But it's that investment in the community. It's that investment in the businesses. Why would a venture capitalist want to pull a company from Maryland to a much higher cost area like Boston? It's their money that's being spent. Why would they do that? Well, they're doing it because that company gets the support that they need in order to grow and thrive and earn that return for the venture capitalist. So there's always going to be trade-offs. There's always going to be a balance that we have to strive for, but we really need to focus on supporting these businesses.
Yeah. May I also say, imagine if you don't do anything to help. Each small business or each local business will have to shoulder that burden of a high cost of living, because we have to, in order to attract the employees into our companies, we have to pay the higher salaries, and we have to take care of it on our own. And as companies find it less attractive to stay here, the burden on the remaining companies that are here are elevated. We are firmly committed. We want to be here. We want to stay here. But to be honest, there is, Marty mentioned venture capital. So recently, we have talked to the top venture capital firms around the nation. And also being in this area, for some reason, being a tech company in this area makes it very difficult for them to establish a higher valuation for a company like ours, despite us being the first to deliver a blockchain and AI solution to the federal government. So I think one of the ways that we can, balance and overcome this dilemma is let's not assume that we have to resort to, a tax-based solution, for everything. Let's make it. Let's not have a reputation of being a very, a tax-heavy local ecosystem, so that we can make it easy for people to come here and be assured that whatever investment that they put here, that they can, sustain that investment. And then let's find a way to bring in venture capital into the area. I think what is really unusual is we have the federal government now is becoming a tremendous source of funding for innovation. $800 billion, the Air Force is putting $800 billion to fund AI innovations, cloud computing innovations, cybersecurity innovations, 5G innovations. $800 billion. The DoD is doing the same with AI. But what's very interesting is we still struggle to take advantage of those opportunities, right? So we need to be able to create a consistent set of policies where it is easy for people to come in and make the investment, and easy for venture capitalists to come in and invest in a company here. If the funds are coming from the federal government, and it's coming, there's one company that I heard recently that was funded by the DoD. They went through an 18-month process, and now they're considered, they're about to get a $1 billion valuation just from the funds that they're getting from the DoD, the initial investment from the DoD. But one of the things that's very unique about the investment in the DoD, which I did not know until recently, if the United States Air Force gives you a SBIR fund, a SBIR investment, a small business innovation research investment, the sole source limit to a small business is $4.5 million now. But if you have a SBIR investment, there is no cap on any sole source investment from a government agency after that, as far as what I was told. So those VCs are starting to look more seriously at government contractors that have, a special, type of technology. And I think there's an opportunity now to bring in venture capitalists to the area and to convince them to make investments here. But we have to have policies that are easy for that kind of thing to occur.
If I can just very quickly follow up, Madam Chair. You made a comment about, we can't look to taxes as a solution to everything. And I would argue that we don't. But California and Massachusetts are not lower tax areas than Maryland and Montgomery County. Again, as what Marty pointed out, and I appreciate, Martin, what your comments were about the investment, and I agree with that. But California and Massachusetts are not lower tax areas. How is it that we are unattractive, whereas they are not?
Anyone wants to give a quick answer before we move on to the next question?
The gentleman on the phone who made that comment, I'm sorry, I forgot his name. But
David, yeah.
David, yes, if you can answer that for me, I would really appreciate it.
Yeah, so I think in part it could be reputational. I get this sense, I have a lot of friends who are CEOs who are, government contractors, health IT companies. Many have started leaving Montgomery County and moving to Virginia. I think a large part could be reputational. But I also think there is a lack of commitment at the county level in technology innovations. And I could be wrong, but I think there's a very high commitment to health tech. I mean, health and biotech, very high commitment. But from a technology perspective, I don't think reputationally there appears to be that sense. And if we can overcome that, then we can attract more companies. I mean, I'm not an expert in economic development. I can only kind of give you my insight from how we see it as these CEOs and what my other colleagues have done. And many of them, they build the company up to like 100 or 200 people, and then they move to Virginia or they move somewhere else.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to the next question by Vice Chair Delegate Solomon.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the participants. This has been a really interesting conversation, and you all sort of touched on some of the things that I've heard from some of the other CEOs. David, I think your point, I had a conversation with a homegrown government contracting firm that's been quite successful last year, and I've gotten to know the CEO quite well. And she said the reason, she's stayed here is because she's from here. And I asked her why she hadn't moved to Virginia and why she didn't set up there. And she said the taxes really haven't been any different, but her frustration has been that in Maryland and in Montgomery County, there hasn't been the level of engagement with her company. And she's been working really hard to try to change that. But, she's like, the cost difference isn't really that big of a deal, but I want a commitment to be here. I want to be part of the ecosystem. I want people to reach out to me and ask if I need things. And she's trying to really change that internally. So it's interesting to hear you say that. The question, I guess, Marty, is sort of the follow-up from our conversation a few weeks ago. I think we've talked a lot about sort of the ancillary pieces and how to attract talent. I'm really curious about how to grow the talent piece. And I touched on it at our last hearing. So, we've got, we have Universities of Shady Grove, which is, in many respects at a crossroads. They have a new leadership coming on board. We're really trying to, to refocus the way that USG is used within the state system right now, as it continues to grow. What is it that we should be looking to do as policymakers with new leadership, not only at the, at the system level with the chancellor, who's, I think, committed more to USG than anyone else, has ever really been, and new leadership at USG themselves. What should we be doing? What should we be driving to fix the issues of not having enough homegrown talent and getting actual movement instead of just the motion?
So I think there's a number of things. First of all, I want to reinforce what you said about the need for community and the example that you gave, the CEO that was just looking for an environment where people reached out to him or her. When I became the CEO of the Tech Council just 2 years ago, the first thing I started doing was calling everybody that I knew in both technology and life science industries and just reaching out to them and asking them what they needed. And that alone has resulted in significant growth in our community because of that outreach, because of that need to be a part of something bigger than themselves. That's critically important. And it's a bit of a challenge here in Montgomery County because, as I said earlier, we're a suburban development. And we're not a tight urban environment, and so we have to try harder to make that happen. So that's one piece. On the workforce development and talent front, a number of things are happening. A number of things are in the works. For instance, Montgomery County Public Schools invited us, the Tech Council, to participate in a meeting with them. They're trying to bring together the K through 12 executives, experts, to come together and speak with one voice. And we're trying to match that on the industry side. So we're pulling together coalitions and groups to come together and speak with one voice to the academic institutions with respect to what do we need? What do we need from the academic institutions, not only today, but 5 years from now? Because we have to be looking to the future as well as what's happening today. And I agree with you. The new president and I don't know if chancellor or vice chancellor, I guess, of USG, I think she's going to be tremendous there in what her focus in focusing that system of universities on this workforce development issue. So I think that's critical. And then I'm going to keep coming back to incubators and accelerators. So it's one thing to develop the talent early and young coming out of college, but then how do you develop the talent to become the next CEOs? How do you develop the talent to become the next C-suite executives and help those companies grow in the process? Well, that's gonna happen through this collaboration. It's gonna happen through incubators. It's gonna happen through other CEOs and volunteers participating in that development. That's where that's gonna come from. I don't want to underestimate the fact that Boston has over 30 life science incubators there. I mean, that's phenomenal. How many life science incubators do we have in Montgomery County? I think the answer, we have a few. I know Angela incubates 1 or 2 companies in her organization. Immunomic Therapeutics incubates 1 or 2 companies, but I think we have 1 official incubator in Montgomery County to help companies grow and develop that C-suite executive talent.
Marty, can I just follow up? Do we have the programs, or are they in the pipeline, in USG to fill the workforce needs, Or do we need to go back to the university system and start to refocus and say, here are the gaps? And I know those are conversations that you're already starting to have, but are there gaps in programs that, you know, we haven't even begun to sort of start putting the nuts and bolts together to get the workforce that you all need?
Can I jump in real quick, Marty?
Yes.
Only because I have to jump off. Also have a 12:30, so my apologies to everyone. But to answer your question, I think that one of the things we could do to help with those needs is to somehow, I don't know if there's ways to encourage or incent the colleges to work with industry to develop some of the specific needs, because I think what happens a lot of times at the university level, it's a lot of theory, and oftentimes we're hiring people that we still have to teach how to work. It's not the practical application, and it's not always appropriate in our industries for apprenticeships. So I think there is a way that we could maybe, how do we, encourage the collaboration between industry and the institutions to create specific programs. They may not be a 2-year program. It could be something more, certificates, things like that, that not only for individuals that might be wanting to get into something, but people who will, who are already in our industries, right? And they need to get a new level of something because it's constantly changing. As David talked about with innovation, that's whether it's in, his field of tech or in my field of tech. It's constantly changing. So you can come out of school and a year later, there's a lot of things you still don't know how to do. So we need, but I definitely think that there's an opportunity that the institutions and universities need to work with industry to develop those programs specifically. So thank you for that. I'm sorry, I have to run. So thank you again for the time, and goodbye. Thank you.
Angela, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I think we're up on our time at 12:30. This has been a tremendously robust discussion, and it's been extraordinary in terms of opening our eyes to the challenges as well as the tremendously unique opportunities that Montgomery County has to grow our future economy, especially the innovation economy. I would say many of the issues that were touched upon, they were really myriad of issues that county leaders and state leaders have been struggling, and academic leaders have been struggling for a long time. Those were not easy issues to be resolved overnight. And the business communities have been either frustrated at or have been advocating on those for many years. But I have to say, one, economic development is a greater good that requires top leadership commitment from the governor, from the county executive, from all levels of state leaders and county leaders. It's not an individual will that can resolve these issues. It does take a village, and it's ultimate team sport, which is why we are all here putting our heads together from public and private sectors to have these meaningful discussions. And the second point I want to make is that what we don't do and have the discipline to not do as legislators is just as important as what we do, whether it's tax policies or regulatory issues. So having a culture of appreciation for the job creators is important. And just have the humility to learn and to listen is just as important. So with that, I want to thank everyone again for all of your contributions to our economy. We are tremendously grateful for everything you have done as job creators and taxpayers. And we hope you will stay here and grow. Whatever we can do to help, we will do everything we can. But finally, let me not forget to mention that this Thursday is our annual priorities hearing for Montgomery County delegation between the senators and the delegates. You're welcome to join us by our I think YouTube channel, Montgomery County Delegation at 7 p.m. And you can also sign up by tomorrow noon at 4 o'clock or something, right? 4 o'clock. You can sign up to testify. We look forward to seeing you there. Thank you so much, and a happy Veterans Day and a happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.